God, thank you so much for your incredibly large heart for the world and your invitation to allow us to participate with you and in what you feel about suffering in the world and what you feel about things that are difficult and things that we often want to shrink back from. And the reality is, Jesus, is that you're not shrinking back from what's happening in the Middle East or anywhere. The takeaway for tonight is that we would all be willing to take another step forward, and whatever that looks like, to know you more and to show you to the world and what you're really like. Try to share what's beneficial about the trip, and the reality is it was a hard situation that I went into, and so the tempting thing is, first of all, for me to sensationalize it for some kind of weird ego thing, and so that I'll feel like you think I'm awesome. So let's just not do that. First of all, Stevie Lujan and everyone here. There's nothing sensational about tonight worth sharing other than God's heart. And so everything about tonight's going to be awesome if we don't just share information and sensational things because they're exciting, but we share an invitation to engage further with the heart of God and what God's actually like. When you get to know God and God, the God that suffers, He doesn't just cause you to wallow in suffering. He causes you to have courage that comes that actually faces suffering and has an answer to it. One of my biggest takeaways is I could go to the Middle East, see really challenging, life-changing things, feel it for like a week, and then just go on my way and go about my business life in the exact same way. And I just would love to make sure that doesn't happen in my own life. As followers of Jesus, to not necessarily have to predict where we go, but if we ask God, I want to know you, God has the freedom, if we really give it to Him, to take us to places that aren't safe and comfortable, but they're not just purely exciting for excitement's sake. Like, I live an exciting life. We just get to go where God's going. Like many of us, I've been clicking through my Facebook feeds, being frustrated and confused by why I'm even on this platform most of the time, but every once in a while something will get my attention. And so there's been a few key moments, right, where we've seen videos and images, even more recently, but even over the last couple years of like, wow, that's really bad. And so for me, it's been years of feeling like this is horrible, like, and feeling a little bit stuck too most of the time. Like, I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, like seeing it, being like, this is not the way it's supposed to be, and sheepishly even at times praying and being like, God, like, I'd love for you to change that situation, but then yet I hear more and more bad stories, and I'm just kind of like, And so the simplicity of why I went is I was tired of just hearing about it and tired of just seeing it and being grieved by it. I wanted to know, God, am I in a place where I trust you enough that you could send me to these kind of places, and maybe I could do something about it. Maybe I could actually be a part of the solution. There's a friend of mine named Steve Gamer, who's a former YWAMer, and he runs a group called Partners, and I'm going to tell you more about them as we progress through the night. But I made the classic mistake. If you have friends like Steve Gamer and you message them like, hey man, love what you're doing, love to be involved, they'll probably invite you. And so I made the classic foolish mistake 6 weeks ago, probably less than that, when I was in New Zealand, of seeing his latest update, a video of him in Mosul, in a total rubble heap with starving families and kids all around him, and him loving people the best that he can, and messaging him on Facebook, thinking, oh, he's probably not even going to see this. He's probably like in Iraq or Syria right now, and no internet. And like 5 minutes later, he responds to my message of me saying, man, I'm so stirred by what you're doing. I felt like I'm supposed to go for a while now. I just don't know what that looks like. And he's like, I know what that looks like. You're going to book a ticket tomorrow, and you're going to join me in 3 weeks in Mosul. So I texted my mom, and I'm like, Mom, I think I'm going to Mosul. It's a text that every mother loves getting, right? I was with my friend Matt Dawson at the time, and I'm like, Matt, I think I'm supposed to go to Iraq, like right now. And Matt made this comment after we had prayed about it, whether I should go, whether it was safe, or whether God was speaking clearly that He'll protect me. I was asking all those classic questions, and Matt just made this comment that hit me so hard. And he goes, isn't it just crazy that me and you can sit here safe and pray whether it's safe for you to go, but that little kid in that clip doesn't get to pray every day whether he wakes up in this reality. But it was a contrast that I was willing to face, and I think that it's a contrast that we would all do well to face more. And it doesn't mean that you have to go to Mosul to face that contrast, but there is real suffering and real pain all around us. And so my big question that I've been wrestling with the last couple of years is I theoretically believe that God actually suffers. The person of Jesus suffers. But I haven't felt it. I had to keep reminding myself of that truth. And I got on an airplane and I went to Western Mosul, which is even more dangerous than Mosul because ISIS is getting pushed out of Mosul further back into Syria. So that black line in the corner is Syria. So this is northern Iraq. Even in Doha, in the layover, I see these group of like soldier-looking dudes, and then I see these 3 Burmese guys with them, and I'm like, I wonder if these guys are with me. And so then I asked the question, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're going into Mosul, and we're with da-da-da-da. I'm like, oh, I'm with you guys, and these guys are like super soldier G.I. Joe guys, and I'm like, oh, okay, so these are the people I'm going with. Okay. So they're a part of a group called Free Burma Rangers. You can look them up. They're pretty wild guys, and so they're former Navy SEALs and Special Forces types guys that have left the military and now go into conflict zones to do humanitarian crisis work. So not just feed people, but feed people that aren't going to get fed no matter what because nobody's crazy enough to go these places. When I kept overhearing things like what we were doing, I was like, oh my gosh, like, oh, this is the real thing, and randomly heard, oh, we're going to go meet with a head Iraqi general at his house tonight and just have dinner with the guy. So the first day I'm in Iraq, I'm sitting in this house with the highest ranking government military person, just having dinner, chilling, shooting the breeze about what's the best spot we can go to. And the best spot to these guys is as close to the action as humanly possible. And if I'm going to be totally honest, I was freaking out. I was genuinely like, what am I doing here? And I kept looking at Steve, and Steve was relaxed. I'm like, I'm just going to follow Steve's lead. And so the next day we get up, and we make the drive from Erbil to Mosul, which is only supposed to be like 2 hours max, but it took us 10 hours to get there because the roads don't really exist there anymore. Most of what we drove that first day was basically this scene, which is little tents in the middle of nowhere of people that have fled their homes, some 10 miles away, some hundreds of miles away, and they're living a temporary existence. So these roads that we're on 24/7 are just people walking and saying, what's next? Am I going to make it today to the next checkpoint where there's relative safety? And so this is the checkpoint going as close to Mosul, and so there's smoke and explosions, and I can hear it, and I can see it, and I can feel it. And I'm probably behind this picture, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, we're going closer than this? There were so many times where it was easy for me to be like, I've made a bad choice. I shouldn't be here. And then there were so many contrasting moments like this, where I'm with a bunch of Iraqi guys that we hired, trucks full of food going, oh, there's a reason why I'm doing this. This food's got to get to these people. And if we don't get it there, some of these people are not going to make it today. They're not going to make it to tomorrow. So we showed up on the first night to this house at like 1 o'clock in the morning, unloaded 5 trucks full of bottles of water and oil and like vegetable oil and flour. And we go into the house, and I didn't even know what it was because it was dark. And we got told where we were sleeping, and we were basically sleeping in this blown out house that 3 or 4 weeks before was an ISIS stronghold. And the military came through and took care of business, and there was glass and shrapnel and RPG explosions fresh there, and blood on the walls and blood on the couches and sofas, and that's where our billeting was for the time we were there. And so that was confronting. I was like, man, I'm never going to complain ever again about where I sleep on outreach or anywhere for that matter. And I sat there that first night trying to process it all of like, okay, I can't figure this out. I can't logically say why I'm here, but I had to rehearse and remember what God had spoken, right? And so I had to say, okay, this is right, even though this feels so incredibly wrong. These are no way to put it other than 2 fresh graves from 3 weeks ago of teenage boys that were killed before ISIS was in that house. And this was the best spot we could be because this is the closest we could get to these people that eventually heard that we were there and came out of the woodworks because they heard that there was food and water and baby formula and diapers. And so for the next 3 days, we fed them, and we loved them, and we prayed for them, and we did the best that we could. I had to choose it. I'm going to choose to be silly, crazy, goofy, kid magnet Stevie, even though I'm freaking out right now, even though looking these kids in the eyes and hearing their parents' stories makes me just want to crawl up into a ball and pretend like none of this is happening. But we got to feed these people, and we got to connect with them, and we got to bless them as they continue to seek refuge and shelter and pray and hope that God brings them closer to some kind of semblance of a normal existence that's not this. To realize this is what the gospel looks like. If the gospel isn't good news to those that need it, then it's not good news at all, right? It was amazing to get there with about $30,000 already given, and every day Steve would say, someone just gave another $10,000. One person just gave another $25,000, and then he'd be like, great, let's send those guys back to the town to get more stuff because there's more people that need it. And so the trip kind of consisted of two parts. The first 5 days we were in that house, and eventually it became kind of weirdly normal. Like I was like, oh, cool, like this makes sense. Like 3 days in, I'm like, this is where we kind of cook food, and this is where we sleep, and this is where the people come. And so I just kind of got into a rhythm, and we go to like these checkpoints, and there'd be like nobody there, and then all of a sudden like 8 trucks full of like 300 people each would show up, and they'd be waiting there at a checkpoint, and they'd all come out shell-shocked, and we'd try to feed them, and I'd pull out my guitar and try to play them a song, and it kind of became like a little bit of a routine, but not really. But I remember easing into it, going, okay, sweet, like I think I can do this. There's a city called Dahuk, which is back in Kurdistan, and a lot of people that partners and groups like Preemptive Love and a bunch of Samaritan's Purse have established really great communities up in the northern part of Kurdistan. Well, we got to go visit those communities, and we brought them chickens, and we brought them sustainable things. In and through the travels, we got to stop at like insanely beautiful, gorgeous places like this place, which is this monastery up from this hill that's 1,800 years old. It's one of the oldest monasteries in the world. And so up until very recently, the last 3 years, it's been filled with Syrian refugees that these nuns take care of. Amazing. And we got to climb up there, and this is the view from up there. So it's like a little town down there, and overlooking that way is Mosul. And as we went up to those northern villages and cities and communities, we got a chance to kind of catch our own breath. I caught my breath for the first time. It wasn't as conflict-oriented. It was a bit more settled. There's no fighting happening in Dahuk at all. But that's where we got to slow down, pull out our cameras, and ask for stories and questions about what they had gone through. And so the team got so much amazing footage and pictures and stories, and I heard the worst things I've ever heard in my life from these people, the most mindless, violent, senseless, evil things that's happened to these people, some of them as soon as 1 month, but over the last couple years. And we got to capture them and try our best to assure them we want to tell your story because it matters, and we want to help people get more involved because you matter. Again, every time we'd show up to community, we get there, it was really somber, it was really mellow. We'd show up, start trying to figure out what we could do to connect the dots. There'd be kids, and then I would be like, okay, am I gonna engage or not? And so I'd pull out this little thumb monster guy, and I would start like finding kids that wanted to smile and interact, and I would start doing thumb monster, and before I know it, 5, 10, 30, 50 kids would just come out of the woodworks, and we would laugh and tickle and play for like hours upon hours. I was utterly exhausted. It was almost like I had to make a choice to like hear the story, validate that it was real, but not come under it, and then still make a choice to be like, I have to love these kids. Like right now, I have to do this. They need this. Their parents need it. Like, it seems so foolish, right? To be like, I'm gonna go out and have a tickle thumb guy fight right now. Like, can you imagine being a parent and not seeing your kid laugh for months upon months, and then finally seeing them laugh and enjoy and keep going for hours upon hours? That would be pretty awesome. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is so simple, it's so easy. But it was one of the hardest choices every time to do. It was like, I felt so stuck. I felt so paralyzed because it's so ugly what we see. And what we hear, and then I was seeing it face to face. It wasn't just like a newsfeed article that I could click and move on from. We had countless fathers coming up to us straight up, just putting out his hand and saying, give me $10,000. And we're like, whoa, that's really direct. And basically they were like, give me $10,000 so I can buy one of my daughters back from ISIS that's been kidnapped for the last 3 years. And we're like, we don't have $10,000. And they'd be like, I need it. And we'd say no. And they go like, all right, see ya. And they move on. And that's a lot of people's existence right now. It's really easy to hear something like that, see the absolute dread in someone's face and go, oh my gosh, hopeless, right? Like, ugh. and then go to a community and let that hopelessness trail into that moment versus being like, but I can do something right now. And so I had to keep reminding myself, no, there's a reason for this, and it's because God is inviting me to engage. That's all that God's looking for. It's all that he wants from you and from me. And from anyone that says they love him, he's like, cool, if you love me, you'll feed my sheep. And the challenging aspect is God isn't more impressed or more proud of me now than he was 15 years ago when I came to Australia and decided to love young people at skate parks. There's no divide there. It's a progression, and it's one that I encourage you to go on. Please, if you're already on it, keep going. Keep making big, bold decisions to say, I'm going to do whatever I can to know God. And as you get to know God, I promise you, you will feel challenged to take care of and show him to people that don't know what he's like. One of the biggest challenges I've had to deal with coming back from this trip and things like North Korea is it can kind of create this weird, I guess Stevie is someone special. And that's a lie, too. And so I don't know what it looks like for you to engage, but I'd love to find out what you engaging looks like. And I'd love to celebrate that. God would love to challenge you to take the next step. And I don't think everybody should go to Mosul right now, in this room even. I don't think our next DTS outreach team should go to Mosul. I think that's a bad idea. But I do think every person in this room should be willing to ask the question, God, do you care about suffering? And if you do care, can you tell me what I can do about it? And to show you that you have something to offer. You do. Right now, you lack nothing. All the reasons and excuses of why you're not smart enough, good enough, holy enough, all that stuff is subpar to the question that you could ask that could change everything about the way you think about your life. Is, God, do you care about suffering, and do you want to use me? Of how challenging that thought is of Jesus' burden being easy and kind and light when Jesus feels the depths and the weights of despair in this way. How does he do that? And I think the reality and the confrontation of this trip for me was I went in and was of best use being myself. And that's a real takeaway I'd love to push forward to you guys tonight is that Jesus is only looking for you to be yourself and to grab his hand and say, whatever I lack, I know you don't. But in the process, you don't become a different person. You become the truest person that you were created to be. But I am energized. I'm not bogged down. I'm not weighed down. I'm not conflicted. I'm motivated more than I was before through my passions, that God's actually used my passions. I think we think when we take on these burdens and these things, we lose something of ourselves. I actually think we gain more something of ourselves. We see, oh, that's why you made me to be a funny guy for me. That's why you want me to sing. That's why you want me to write songs. It's not that those things become some side dish. It's I don't have to let go of myself to be used by you. I get to actually enjoy the things that you purpose me to do more. I really want to challenge you that whatever you're good at, somehow in some way can affect what's going on in Iraq and Syria, today and tomorrow. And there's really practical ways you can do that. You can go on websites like Partners and not only give, but you can say, click become a fundraiser, and whatever you're good at, you can pray and get creative and start an actual fundraiser and then ask people to give through your creativity. But also, why not take the next step and say, whatever I'm good at, if you don't like what you see in your Facebook feeds and your Instagram stories, well, then tell better stories in those things about what's possible. We kind of do the social media posting weekly schedule and how much is cool for me to talk about what's going on in Iraq and Syria. Maybe once every 10 posts. And I'm not saying you should do 10 out of 10 posts. There's no formula here. But I would say be willing to be challenged to say what is of great importance to you right now. If you're stirred tonight, hold on to that stirring and say, what can I actually do tonight and tomorrow that furthers what's possible here? I think in 5 years, you won't look back and go, I posted too much about Syria. I promise you won't do that. Whatever it is that stirs you, you won't look back and even 6 months ago, oh, I think people, even if you think people are sick of hearing about it, you'll look back and go, I'm glad I was willing to have people be sick of hearing about it because it hasn't changed enough yet. It's still going on and it needs to stop. And so if you're convinced that it's a just cause, why not wring it till that thing is dry? I would challenge you guys in so many different categories that first of all, you can take a step forward this in practical ways of going, praying, giving, and sacrificing something, and probably being pretty shocked about what you gain in return. What you gain is not something or stuff, it's you gain God's heart. you gain nearness. You get to be closer to what God is like. And what better goal could there ever be in this life to know God and his heart more, to engage with him, and to say, I'm not just kind of a friend of God, I'm an actual friend of God. He trusts me. He likes to share things with me. He loves to share his secrets and his thoughts and his ideas. And he believes that if he shares it with me, I'm not going to just ignore it and squander it. I'm going to actually do something with it. I'm going to apply myself. It's not something I've done. It's not a notch on my belt. It's not a story I tell. It's not a newsletter point that gets me more supporters. None of that stuff. I can say that the people of Iraq, their beautiful spirit, their generosity, and their hospitality has revealed more of God than I knew before. And it's, God help me, let it change me forever. Check out these guys. You probably have heard of a group called Preemptive Love. They're doing a lot of amazing things. I don't know who's going to take that challenge and actually go to these websites and participate in some way, shape, or form. But I challenge you to make that real, make it practical. And so if there's one takeaway from tonight is say, God, what does it look like for me to get my hands dirty a little bit more than they already are? And just see what he says and does. And do that by being informed, by participating and activating different things and watching as much as you can watch. Doing it with an open mind. Ultimately saying, God, as much movies as I could watch, as much websites as I could visit, as much things as I could do. Ultimately, the best thing I can do is to continue to ask you for your heart and trust that you're going to give it to me. Let's see what else. I think there was another clip that I wanted to show you guys, just to end things on.
They'll pour that footing and
Okay, so this is where we drove in. 4 days later, this empty space here was filled with about 10,000 tents that the UN had actually built in 3 days. Another community. It was pretty incredible. So it was like nothing, and then we came back, and there was like a whole community. This is about 3 hours into about 5 hours of doing this day.
I knew it.
Yeah, that's Missionary Fail Blog. That's a good way to end the night, knocking over children. And so I played this song about God's heart and Jesus being the suffering servant and willing to feel people's pain and offer them something better. And that felt really stupid at the time. It felt really feeble. And I played it, and then I'm like sitting there going, was that a good choice? And the feedback was basically, I felt the Holy Spirit. I felt peace. And I'm really glad you did that. And then I went out of the tent and swung that kid around and knocked someone over like 5 minutes later. And then I did that for the rest of the day. And then the next day I did that for 5 hours straight. And then I heard horror stories, and then I did it again. And it's just choosing to say, I have something I can offer. I'm going to do it. And I guess it's a rise above kind of thing. It's not pretending like it's not there. It's just putting it in its right place. It's saying whatever our gaps are, or our doubts, or our fickle reasons that God doesn't want to use you or can't use you, or the situations of your life or the world are too hard, they're not. They need to be confronted with a deeper truth and a deeper reality. God, I just want to end by asking again, would you make that real in my own life again? Would you make that real for each one of us? We leave tonight saying the only thing you're looking for from me is a willingness to ask the question, God, do you want to use me? And God, do you care about this world? And do you want to use me to do something about what's going on in this world? And so I pray that would solidify in our hearts, that we leave tonight motivated, empowered, and inspired by you, Holy Spirit, to engage like we'd never engaged before. We are tired of hearing bad story after bad story after bad story. We have faith for something better, to bless the people of Iraq and to bless the people of Syria. Every person, not those that agree with us, not those that look like us, not those that participate in democracy the way we think we should. Every human being that's there that's made in your image, we bless them. God, we pray that you would invite them into a deeper fullness of who you are. So let it be. Amen.